Okay, we're good to go. Chris, you can hear me? Yeah, we're good. Awesome. All right, well, thanks guys for giving me the opportunity to share today. I'm going to start off with with what we start our check-in with. So, hi, my name is Spencer, a much-loved child of God, recovering from sexual addiction on my journey to freedom by the help of God and all my brothers here. So, my all clear today sits at 445 days, and I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for God and the intervention that He decided to bring into my life, and quite honestly, most of you in this group. I know that not all of you know all of my story, but I'm going to share a bit with you guys today, just in terms of how I got here, and then kind of go over what the last 2 years have looked like. And I will start off. You guys can see here, I have a little book. I know that a lot of times we post stuff that we're talking about online and everything, but I have a journal here, basically almost 2 years worth of notes from this ReGroup from every Tuesday morning the last 2 years. And basically I kind of made a list of some of the key points that have stood out to me and that have helped me over the last 2 years, that, you know, I'll just kind of share with you guys that have helped me in this recovery process. And quite honestly, I would encourage all of you, if you don't have a way of taking notes or you know, jotting down your own thoughts kind of throughout the talks, you know, that you guys might think about doing that, because it's definitely helped me, and there's been times that I've flipped back in the book and with different colored pen made notes on things that I wrote down and, you know, had thoughts on. So but yeah, just a little bit about myself. I'm the oldest of three. Well, before I start there, I've been married for 11 years. This June was 11 years, and quite frankly, I'm very lucky to have celebrated that university anniversary. We are coming up on 2 years in August since D-Day, since it was discovered that that I had been cheating on my wife. Over the past 5 years, I have struggled with infidelity, and that has been the cause of a lot of hurt and a lot of pain, and a lot of hard work over the last 2 years to, quite honestly, hang on to my life and hang on to my family, so, and my wife. Yeah, growing up, I was the oldest of three. I you know, had as quote unquote normal upbringing as one could kind of ask for. Very fortunate to grow up with just a lot of good people in my life. I was gifted athletically, which is where I concentrated most of my efforts growing up, specifically in soccer. By the age of 15, I was on the Canadian youth national team with soccer, and through that, at the end of high school, had a full ride scholarship to a university in the States, and from there things kind of fell apart. When I went down to the States, I went down with the mindset that I was going to focus only on sports, and you know, not focus on you know, girls and a relationship and things like that. And that quickly turned. Within the first couple of weeks, I'd found someone that I became very attached to, and she ended up being kind of the first major heartbreak in my life. that caused me to, essentially create this mindset around women that I had for a long time. She broke my heart and ended up cheating on me with someone else, and I found out about it, and blah blah blah, and yeah, which like I said, resulted in kind of the mindset that I had for a long time, just towards relationships and women, and my attitude, and being the athlete in me. Not that I'm necessarily a narcissist, but I did enjoy scoring the goals while playing soccer, and just being the main guy that people relied on in terms of winning games and things like that. But after university in the States, I came home, and shortly after that, I met another very lovely woman who is now my wife. And like I said at the beginning, I'm very grateful that she still is my wife. We started dating for a couple of years, and we got engaged, and that is when I experienced my first kind of struggle with infidelity and cheating, and I ended up calling off the wedding. I had moved in with her family already at that time, and it was a very painful process to move out of there, and dealing with her family and all of that. We were separated for about a year and a half, and then came back together, and 6 months later we were engaged, and then 6 months after that we were married. And at the time, I had thought that me just making the conscious decision that I wasn't going to revisit those demons from the past, and this stronghold that the enemy had on me. I thought that was going to be enough, and it was for a while during the honeymoon stage, right? But about 4 years in, after my my second child was born, after my daughter was born, I ended up going down the rabbit hole again, and 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, I was essentially I was caught cheating. So here we are today. I know in Dr. Weiss's book, it talks about humility, and the difference between humility and humiliation, and through God's wisdom, I needed to be humiliated before I really understood the impact that I was having, not just on myself, but my wife, and my children, the person that I was showing them how to lead a life. So that brings me to today, being here, sharing my story. Again, very lucky to have celebrated our 11-year anniversary. Very lucky to have someone in my life that, quite frankly, I don't understand how she has the grace or the time for me, but I think that God put her in my life for a reason too. But anyways, I don't want to get too emotional, so I will start going through the list of these thoughts that I've had in my journal. So this is semi in chronological order in terms of how I was working through my recovery process. And just a couple points. A lot of these points are single points from specific discussions. So some of these we could probably spend hours individually discussing and how they relate to the recovery process. But these were ones that I kind of really stuck to and hung my hat on in regards to, sticking to the person that I wanted to become and the person that God was calling me to be. So to start off with, acceptance, accepting that I chose to hurt her, and that was wrong. Early on in recovery, it was difficult, but seeking to understand her more than her understanding me. Early on in recovery, I wanted to talk a lot about fixing stuff within our marriage rather than just focusing on myself and the things that I needed to work on. And it took me a long time to understand that wasn't going to be a conversation I was going to have for a very long time. And that's okay. And I understand that now. And there are times that I still want to have that conversation and it's still not ready almost 2 years later. But yeah, I wrote down process and rules of understanding her. And the biggest rule was taking responsibility, no exceptions. Early on in recovery, I really struggled with that, taking responsibility. I seem to have an excuse for everything, and just wanted to blame on someone else, even though I was the one that got caught. So, second one, boundaries. I know this is something we've talked about a lot as a group. One of the points that I wrote down here was hold yourself accountable to your boundaries and not just your relapses. I think that is a big one. I don't think we can have enough boundaries. Dr. Dave, I know you've talked about it. I think his list consists of 52 or 53 boundaries. The first time I came back with a list of boundaries that was, 5 to 7 boundaries long, or points long. It wasn't really anything in comparison to what it should be. So, and another important thing around boundaries was also just to have boundaries that align with your spouse, the person that you're doing the work for, to really show them that you're invested in doing what they want to see out of you, and not just placing boundaries in what you want to see in yourself. So my next point here is coasting is not coasting. Coasting is going backwards. A lot of times early on in recovery, there was large gaps in doing the work in terms of recovery work or the step work and things like that. There's times where it's going to feel like it's going better. And so you just kind of take your foot off the pedal in terms of recovery work, and it can quickly turn into going backwards, especially with your spouse. And if there's a trigger and there hasn't been any work done in a while, sometimes it puts you in a tough spot. So, I wrote down here, it doesn't mean that, always moving forwards means that it's going to be a faster process of getting over something, or that it'll get to forgiveness quicker. It just means that there needs to be a consistent effort in always moving forward. It's hard work, and there was times that I definitely learned a lesson the hard way in terms of recovery and expectation from my wife. My next point, in large exclamation marks, I wrote stubborn obedience. This is one that we've talked about a lot, and one that I actually value quite a bit, especially early on. People like Dr. Dave, Chris, yourself, we had a lot of conversations, just that the advice that you guys gave, sometimes I didn't understand, or maybe didn't even necessarily agree with. I knew that if I wanted to make the changes, I had to listen, not only to you guys, but also to God in terms of spending time in the Word and listening to what He has to say. And so, stubborn obedience was a big one for me. That really helped me push through some of the hard times, because a lot of times I didn't necessarily understand even what was going around, especially if there was triggers and arguments and things like that. So, stubborn obedience. I wrote down here, set a precedence in your future actions directed by God's word, which was a key point for me. My next point that I wrote down, make decisions on what you value, not on how you feel. This was also one that I really struggled with early on. Early on, I had expressed to Dr. Dave in a text message just about how I felt and how I didn't feel, and whether or not I actually loved my wife and if I wanted to continue being married. And there was a lot of different thoughts rattling around in my head. Through this process, one of the things that my wife and I had agreed on was that she had 24-hour access to my phone all the time. And I hadn't been open about how I was feeling in regards to these things with my wife. And she went into my phone and saw that I messaged Dr. Dave and saw that exactly what I had messaged him. And, that created a very lengthy, one-sided conversation. But I think that scenario and what happened there really kind of drove home the point, and Dr. Dave says it over and over again: stay in your lane, stay in your lane, stay in your lane. Continue to do the right things, not driven by what you feel, but because they're the right things to do, right? Don't let your feelings drive you. So I wrote down here, an affair doesn't start in the doorway of the bedroom, it starts in the window of your mind. And I think that was a line early on that really struck a chord with me. So just making decisions on what you value based in the Word of God, I think is very helpful, especially early on. Next point, it's not how close you can get, but it's about how pure you can stay. And I think that really leads itself to creating those boundaries, and ensuring just that we don't get anywhere close to those boundaries. And these boundaries were very hard for me. I had a lot of relationships with a lot of different women, and it was very hard for me to create boundaries in regards to communication. This was a hard one for me to learn, but one that today I am very appreciative of in terms of being diligent about, and quite honestly, I'm still diligent. I have to be with that one. But the next point I wrote down, volunteer information, be open, be intentional about communication. We talk about this a lot in the group in regards to also being addicted to lying in regards to all of this. And this was very hard for me because I had spent many, many years hiding a lot from my wife, and to all of a sudden be as open and transparent as I needed to be in order to try and gain and work on regaining the trust of my wife was very hard. And being open in communication is still something I struggle with today in terms of volunteering. I feel like I'm very good at it, and my wife would tell you that I am terrible at it. So it's definitely something that you can lean into in terms of feedback from your spouse. This one would be one I would encourage everyone to be willing to be open and listen to about, because I don't think any of us are as good as we think we are when it comes to this. So next one is one we've talked about a lot. Boys make excuses, men make changes. And Dr. Dave, this is one that you've hammered home from the beginning. I almost said beginning of time, but from the beginning of when you started this regroup. But I truly believe in this one, and within this one, the big one for me was anchoring truths. And at the end of this, I will read my 5 anchoring truths that I had written out for my wife, that she has, and that in any moments of questioning or hurtfulness or arguments where we need to just kind of take some time away and things like that. These anchoring truths are one that I essentially just center my thoughts around, knowing that I don't want to let myself get to a bad place. So next one, tie your identity to being a child of God, not how your relationship is with your spouse. And that one as well was one that I early on really struggled with. But I've never been an overly spiritual person, and that's probably one of the biggest things I need to work on is always being in the Word, but just to have that identity in God, and that essentially driving your decisions and your actions and who you want to be. Next, I wrote, be willing to listen to God, not just speak to God about your problems. That one was one that early on was one that was an opportunity, and even now is just being willing to listen to God in terms of who He puts in my life, and what my next steps are. I think the biggest one here for me was when I was let go. I wasn't let go from my work because of any specific actions at work, but it was over a length of time at work and poor performance that kind of resulted in me letting go, and I was unemployed for 7 months. Thankfully, this was a discussion I'd had with my wife, and that was a possibility, and me working to try and get myself back, and it just didn't happen. And so I think this was one where this really hit home in terms of just listening to God and taking me out of an environment that I needed to get out of. And just I don't know if I wasn't willing or just couldn't do it myself, but yeah, God had a plan. Next point, practicing discipline, follow through. You need resolve, not excuses. Consistency changes character. And I wrote here, don't half-ass your effort, because the person you're doing it for will know. I think this is a critical part. The person that you're doing it for really does see through any of the BS, especially after everything kind of comes out. So authenticity is huge in recovery. The next point was one that kind of hit home for me early on in my recovery. Don't let the addiction take away from the father they deserve, in regards to my children. I couldn't early on, I couldn't even ask my oldest son to be a good example for his younger brother, just with the shame that I had, and just trying to get over that. And that hurt for sure. I don't, yeah. I want them to be proud of the father I am. And at that time, I wasn't that person, and I found it hard to ask them to do the right thing. So yeah, I'm better at it now, and I'm, I think I'm on my way to kind of getting there, but it's still something that is always on the front of my mind and my heart. So the next point I have, and this is from a meeting on March 17th, 2020, right around the time that things around COVID kicked into high gear, but I wrote social distancing with exclamation marks. both physically and emotionally from women. This was a big one for me, and this still plays a key role in how I communicate and how I interact with the opposite sex. It's something that I'm very hyper aware of. And I know that Dr. Dave has a lot of boundaries around, even let's say going out for lunch in settings where you're never alone with another female and things like that. Like I said, these are things I'm very hyper aware of. Walking into meeting rooms and things like that. If there's only a single female in, I'll stand up and, it's funny, actually, one time I walked in with a cup of coffee, and because there was only one female in the other room, I stood up and I said, oh, I need to go get a cup of coffee. And then I came back and I had 2 cups of coffee sitting at the table once the next person got in there. So just things like that. And sometimes it seems silly, but these are things that I need to continue doing to stay on that positive path. There's a couple of points here that I wrote down. There's a difference between intention versus action, words versus works, and plans versus follow through. I think those were 3 key points for me that I always went back to, and definitely one that my wife would bring up with me. The intention versus action one was a big one. And like I said, sometimes you get caught coasting, and it's great to be intentional, but when there's no action behind it, it's tough to argue with. So the next point, and this was one we talked about a couple months back, and this is more of a perspective thing, but this recovery process, it's not about sacrifice, it's about surrender. And I think changing that perspective for me was a big one. I wasn't, the things that I was doing and I thought I was quote unquote giving up, wasn't the case. I was actually gaining so much more with just time with my family, being able to become closer with God, and so much more. So I think just that perspective and taking the time to step back and really look at what you're gaining versus what you think you're giving up made a big difference. The next point I wrote, don't compare. There's a difference between comparing up and looking up. Every recovery process is different. Everyone's journey is different. And it's important not to compare, but to be able to look to others just as kind of, guides. And Chris, you've spoken many times here to the group as well. Cam, you as well, Dr. Dave, Ryan and some of the other ones. I think that, looking up to you guys and just being able to feed off of the talks and suggestions and advice that you give us is huge. And so I've made it a point not to compare, just because, like I said, nobody's the same. So, and then the last point I wrote down here is don't abuse grace. You can't ask for forgiveness and not change. And I think that's an important one, both for with your spouse and with God. Just to, if you ask for forgiveness and there's that driving change in your heart and your spirit, it's hard work. But if you want it, that you kind of dig your heels in and get the work done. Something that's mentioned in the group before that has really stuck with me in the past is be your own answer to prayer. Simply just praying a prayer doesn't necessarily mean something's going to happen or it's going to turn out a certain way, this or that. But be part of that answer to prayer. Be your own answer to prayer, right? Put in the work, do the right things, and God will answer those prayers in His own way. So I wrote down here again, just at the end, God is the single most significant factor in driving my change, hands down. like I said, I'm not necessarily the most overly spiritual person, but without him and leaning into him time and time again, and just asking him to show me what his will is, and where he wants me to go, and I wouldn't be here today without it. So I'll read you guys just my 5 anchors that I have, and I put this in a book that I gave to my wife for Mother's Day, and so she has it all the time. But my 5 anchoring truths. Number 1, I love my wife with all my heart. I cherish her unconditional love, and I don't ever want to lose her. Number 2, God is transforming my life, and I believe in his truth and his strength. Number 3, I love our children, and I want them to be proud of the man they call dad. I want to be a man of integrity. Number 4, this is hard. Recovery is hard. Good choices over a period of time create positive changes moving forward. Number 5, I have amazing people in my life that love me. Lean on them for support and encouragement. Those are my 5 anchoring truths. So if there's ever a moment where I feel, either weak or an opportunity to go back to a place, I lean into those. So, and lastly here, guys, there's a piece of paper we gave out a while ago, but the recovery scriptures, how many is it now? It's 60 verses that we handed out. There's a couple in here that I just want to kind of go over that have kind of helped me along the way. The big one was Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not onto your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will direct your path. I think that is I don't want to say a common one, but one that I really lean into. The other one that we've talked about before that talks about renewing your mind, Romans 12:1-2. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve God's will, or that what God's will is good, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. So there's 3 others, and I'll let you guys look them up. But 2 Corinthians 4:16-18. There was Galatians 6:7-9, and 2 Timothy 2:22. And this one actually, it says, run from anything that stimulates youthful lust. Instead, pursue righteous living, faithfulness, love, and peace. Enjoy the companionship of those who call on the Lord with pure hearts. And I would consider all of you guys to fall into that category, because you guys are right there along with me. And in almost 2 years, I may have missed 1 meeting. You guys are part of the foundation that hold me accountable and keep me moving forward. So, but yeah, that's my story. This is where I'm at. I know there was a lot there, but that was basically kind of some highlights of the last 2 years, almost 2 years of taking down notes. So honestly, guys, I'm an open book. If you guys ever have any questions or just want to chat or go over some of the step work, please always reach out. Thanks, guys.